Hi, welcome back. We're in Lecture 2, Segment 2. The topic of this lecture is correlational research, and the topic of this segment is intelligence research, which is my own area of expertise. And the point of this segment is, again, to talk about how correlational research is used to understand the structure of human intelligence and to develop theories about human intelligence. So, what is intelligence? Intelligence is famously difficult to define, so I took a pretty popular definition from the Wall Street Journal back in 1994. This was an agreed upon definition from top researchers in the field at the time, and they defined intelligence as a very general mental capability that, among other things, involves the ability to reason, plan, solve problems, think abstractly, comprehend complex ideas, learn quickly, and learn from experience. It is not merely book learning, a narrow academic skill, or test-taking smarts. Rather, it reflects a broader and deeper capability for comprehending our surroundings. It's catching on, it's making sense of things or figuring out what to do. Now, what type of research supports that idea, or supports even the idea that there is such a thing as a general intelligence? Well, over 100 years of research that mainly employs correlational research methods supports that idea. So basically the idea that if you score well in one type of subject in school, you're going to score well on another type of subject. Or if you score well on one kind of mental test, you tend to score well on another type of mental test. This has been observed over and over again for over 100 years in intelligence research. And so, as this slide indicates, we know this from examining lots and lots of patterns of correlations. And I'll refer to these types of investigations as studies. Just like the personality research, they're mainly studies. They're not experiments. And that's an important distinction, is these are just studies of behavior and that nothing is manipulated. Whereas in experimental research, there's a manipulation. Like the polio vaccine trials, there was a manipulation. A child received a vaccine or a placebo. In the working memory training experiments, there was a manipulation. They either did the training or they didn't do the training. These are just studies of behavior. We go out, we measure lots of things and look for patterns of correlation. There's no manipulations in these studies. So important distinction between study and experiment. So here's an example again of a positive correlation. And this is what we typically see if we administer some sort of mental test or IQ test to lots and lots of people. What tends to happen is if we have one IQ test here on the x-axis, people who do well on this test, they tend to do well on another IQ test. So you see each dot in this is called a scatter plot. We'll get into this more on the lecture on correlation and in the second lab on correlation regression. People who do well on one test tend to do well on another kind of test. And this has been observed for over 100 years in lots and lots and lots of studies of intelligence. So that led to the first sort of idea or theory of intelligence proposed by Charles Spearman in 1904, that there was some sort of general intelligence that must account for this positive correlation across all sorts of tests or all sorts of types of material in school. So if we looked at kids' grades in history, in a language class, in a math class, in a science class, they all tend to show that positive correlation. So there must be some factor or some trait among individuals or among kids in school that causes this variance or causes these correlations across all these different kinds of tests. And Spearman referred to that as G, or general intelligence. One of Spearman's early critics, Thurstone, observe that, well, some correlations are stronger than others. Yes, all the correlations across the children's school grades are positive, but some of them are stronger than others. So for example, if I look at a correlation between math and science, that correlation tends to be higher than, say, math and history. Even though this is a positive correlation, the slope of this line's going up. This line is going up. It's a positive correlation. The correlation between math and science scores tends to be higher than the correlation between math and history scores. So Thurstone argued that there are different types of intelligence. So there's something like verbal ability and perhaps spatial or mathematical ability, and those are separable. And so verbal ability is more important for history class and language class, and spatial ability or quantitative ability is more important in math class and science class. And there's some support for that theory of intelligence. The only problem with that approach is that there still tends to be a positive correlation between these guys. So even among verbal and spatial ability, there's still some positive correlation. As you saw in the scatter plot with math and history scores, they're still positive. So what that led people to propose is what's known as a hierarchical model of intelligence. And this remains the most dominant model of the structure of human intelligence to this day, is the idea that there's still this general intelligence, or G factor, if you've heard of that in the media. There's a general intelligence, and then there are several of these sort of group factors, as they're known, that predict performance in lots of different either academic classrooms or in different kinds of mental tests, different types of IQ tests. So this is sort of the dominant prevailing theory of intelligence, and it's supported by years and years and years and studies of studies that have examined patterns of correlations. So this hierarchical model of intelligence is supported just like the big five factor model of personality is supported by correlational research. And that's summarized here in this slide. There's a general ability, and then there's several more specific abilities. And you need both of those to fully account for all the patterns of correlations that we observe in these types of correlational studies. And again, I just want to use this as an example of correlational research. I don't want to get into a big debate about intelligence, but if you do want to know more about intelligence research, feel free to look at my own research. I do research on this, or if you want to know more about that hierarchical model I just showed you, just Google the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory of intelligence. That's sort of the prominent theory of intelligence right now. Again, why is it the prominent theory of intelligence? Because it's supported by years of correlational research, looking at patterns of correlations among lots of different test scores. No experimental research per se. We're not manipulating anything in those studies. We're just looking at the patterns of correlations across test scores or task scores. And that's the end of that segment.